I had a recent blog post in Filter about dementia and alcohol. And I consider it, I've had this experience of where I feel something's completely crucial in the world and other people don't feel that way. And I feel it's, I sometimes I wonder where have I gone wrong? But what can I do? I can only just describe what I think is being essential. And people are very worried about dementia in the world today. It's everybody's worried about COVID, but sort of almost disease-wise in second place is dementia. The World Health Organization has been declaring itself on it. They expect the amount of dementia worldwide to double by 2050. And a strange thing happened this past year in June. People noticed it, but not as many because they're worried about COVID. The FDA approves drugs, and they approved the drug for dementia. But for the first time in their history, they have an expert panel, who are the geniuses in the field of dementia and medication and therapeutics. And their expert committee voted unanimously not to approve a drug, and they approved it anyhow for dementia. And, you could and some of the members of the committee said, well, this approval will do more harm than good. And so, I don't know, the short answer, why do you think they approved it then? And went against the advice of their own expert committee? Well, they're tense like everybody else. Everybody's worried about dementia. They say, well, we have to approve something.
Mm-hmm.
And there was
doing something instead of doing nothing apparently is somehow good. Right.
So, everybody knows therapy for dementia is not good. Everybody in the business knows we don't have therapies for dementia. And so there's an amazing thing. Archie Brodsky and I, in 2000, published something called Psychological Benefits of Moderate Drinking. And we reviewed all the data on that. And some of the things that are most clear are most people derive positive feelings of pleasure and sociable feelings from drinking. Boom. A second phenomenon that's true is that people are more likely to be better educated and employed who are moderate drinkers. Of course, that could go either way. Well, maybe they get out more. But something that came up that we hadn't been aware of, at the time, there were maybe 5 or 6 studies that said this. People who drank moderately were more likely to have long-term cognitive better functioning. And so that's pretty remarkable. And the World Health Organization came out in 2018 and said there are no safe levels of drinking. And 2 of the people I know who led that worldwide health epidemiological association are Jürgen Rehm and Robin Room. Robin I've known for quite a long time. So since Archie and I published that in the Journal of Drug and Alcohol Dependence in 2000, in 2004, there's a famous study in England called the Whitehall Study, which is where they just track civil servants. And it's a good, it's not a random sample, but let's just say they have a good handle on their population. They know where they are. Those in 2004, those who consumed at least one drink in the past week compared with those who did not were significantly less likely to have poor cognitive functioning. The beneficial effect extended to those drinking more than 240 grams a week. That's 30 drinks or more. The effect was stronger for women than men. The relations were not explained by confounding by smoking and physical and mental health. They concluded with this assertion, the researchers, for middle-aged subjects, increasing levels of alcohol consumption were associated with better function regarding some aspects of cognition. Wow. I mean, so A, nobody in America believes that, but B, they would never publish that finding.
Hmm.
And so let's go back. And they themselves said, of course, we're not recommending that people drink, because that's what you have to say. So that caused me, in this piece that I wrote, to go back. A famous thing happened. A man named Carl Seltzer revealed in 1997, the most famous epidemiological study of alcohol in America is the Framingham Study. Framingham's a small town in Massachusetts. And like the Whitehall study, you could sort of put your arms around Framingham. It's a small community, and they could sort of grab it and measure people for decades. So Carl Seltzer in 1997 revealed that people who drank had fewer heart attacks. He discovered that. And then the NIH, who funded the National Institutes of Health, said, we're not going to let you publish that. You just can't do that. And they said, they gave him a memo, an article which openly invites the encouragement of undertaking drinking with the implication of prevention of coronary heart disease would be scientifically misleading and socially undesirable in view of the major health problems of alcoholism that already exist in this country. So then you're sort of saying, well, we don't care what they find in Framingham. We're not going to tell them that.
Right. You can't find out what's true unless you say what's true in a different way. Yeah.
And they wouldn't even let them publish it. So in 2004, Framingham was finally allowed to publish. They found fewer heart attacks during 35,563 person years of follow-up. That means you're following people for thousands of people for 20 years. In the community, alcohol consumption is not associated with increased risk for congestive heart failure, even among heavy drinkers. That's, more than 2 drinks a day for men, more than 15 drinks a week for men, and more than 8 drinks for women. And to the contrary, when consumed in moderation, alcohol appears to protect against congestive heart failure. I don't know. Isn't that worth knowing? They finally published that in 2004. Then in 2007, PBS had a special narrated by Larry King, who had a heart thing called The Hidden Epidemic Heart Disease. And Framingham was the focus, and they had a bunch of experts. And Larry King interviewed them. They talked about exercise and diet, even sex, and they never mentioned alcohol. 2007, you can't, I don't know, if you would have said to these experts, they would have been highly cautious. That's their nature. But they would have said, well, moderate drinking isn't bad for the heart. And in fact, we have evidence that it can be helpful to the heart. That's what they would have said, but they didn't. They also mentioned, Framingham also did a study of cognitive performance. They published the results of cognitive functioning. Women who drank moderately 2 to 4 drinks a day showed superior performance in many cognitive domains relative to abstainers. For men, superior performance was found within the range of 4 to 8 drinks a day. I mean, those are so radical, they couldn't even publish that. So in summary, 2 pioneering epidemiological projects, the British Whitehall cohort and the American Framingham studies, found strong evidence for the cognitive benefits of alcohol. Both studies found that dementia is more likely to be associated with drinking too little than with drinking too much. So you're not, and then, in 2018, Europe said there's no safe level of alcohol. So a strange thing happened. 2 more studies came out. In 2019, Jürgen Rehm, who I somewhat know, published a scoping review where he looked at all the best studies from 2000 to 2017, and he examined 28 meta-studies which combined other data. And although causality could not be established, light to moderate alcohol use in middle late adulthood was associated with a decreased risk of cognitive impairment and dementia. Based on 28 mega studies where they combine, I don't know, isn't that worth knowing about in the history of the world?
It's not even that it's worth knowing. It's worth knowing that the studies were conducted, and it's worth knowing the outcomes of the studies. But it's more than anything, it's just worth being out there. I mean, if you want to get down to it and say, well, there must be something else going on. Let's figure out what are the confounding. Well, then that's what science is. And so to say, and I think this is what you're trying to say, the FDA needs to put something out, but it can't be something like that. It can't be something like suggesting that there's some relationship with alcohol and low risk of dementia or low risk coronary failure. It's a set of ideas that you have to have that are not scientific. You have to be in a rush to do something.
Come to grips with this data, even if you want to explain it away.
Yeah.
And I'm going to talk about a man named Tim Stockwell, who Tim Stockwell's a man who I've had drinks with, I can think of in Vancouver, in New York, and in Lausanne, Switzerland. I used to get around more than I do now. And he's busy explaining that all those apparent benefits are because people who are better socially integrated drink more. It's causality's reversed. And I go, all right, I'm not even going to dispute that. That's still worth knowing.
Right, exactly.
If you're in a socially integrated atmosphere, you're going to drink more, but in a way that's positive. That's already kind of reassuring to a lot of people. There are probably people who read that World Health Organization thing and said, oh my God, I'm drinking too much, but they're in a stable. So
Right. In other words, you could say something like, let's take dementia, and you could say, well, couldn't it be the case that people who don't get dementia are the kinds of people who are more likely to be able to drink moderately when they drink? And you're saying maybe, but how come we
stable situations,
right,
and well educated, and if you're one of those people, you're probably good to go. That's not your biggest worry, is having a couple of cocktails or wine at dinner and you're going to get dementia. That's not what you should be worried about in life.
Right. So even those findings will suggest that the over worrying about, well, over worrying is leading anyway, but the worrying about alcohol and how many drinks you consume and that being the health risk or not, that's misguided.
That's backwards.
Right.
So then I go to, in 2020, JAMA Network published a study. Does an association exist between current low to moderate alcohol drinking and cognitive function trajectories? Our study suggested that low to moderate drinking was associated with better total cognitive function and better individual cognition domain results, And this included lower rates of decline in each of these cognitive domains. That's fancy talk for saying they got less dementia. So we approved, FDA approved the drug that the experts say, we're not buying this drug. But alcohol is not a drug. We've never tested it as a medicine. But study after study, and the study that found this is called the Health and Retirement Study. It's a panel study of 20,000 older Americans. A panel study means you impound a group of people. They don't put them in a compound, but they track them. Those are expensive studies because it's not like a random study. You got the people, got to keep them in touch with them, got to keep mailing them, you even test them cognitively. It was done at the University of Michigan with funding by the National Institute of Aging and the Social Security Administration. So, it's not like the Wine Institute did this study in their spare time. These are the best of the best. And they're saying, we're not out here selling alcohol, but people who drank from light to moderate amounts, and we followed them for a decade, had less dementia. Mm-hmm. Now, the National Institute of Aging has a website. And it's called Facts About, on their website, they have facts about aging and alcohol. And they have a bullet, an indent. Uncle George's and Grandma Betty's stories. I didn't make this up, that anyone at any age can have a drinking problem. Uncle George always liked his liquor, so his family may not see that his drinking is getting worse as he gets older. Grandma Betty was a teetotaler all of her life until she started having a drink each night to help her get to sleep. Now no one realizes that she needs a couple of drinks to get through each day. These are common stories. They pay, I don't know how much that National Retirement Study cost. It cost a ton of taxpayer dollars. They could say, well, we found, and we don't want to over push this, that people who drank in their old age had less dementia. But they didn't say that. So these are common stories. I ask, how common are George's and Betty's stories? You can look at the National Retirement Study. 85% of the people who drink in middle to old age are low to moderate drinkers, which it's not surprising.
No, not at all.
But the majority of older Americans in that study, more than half, don't drink at all. So somebody might think, maybe we should loosen the cogs a little bit and tell older people instead of just totally negative stories, there's a positive range of drinking that you can have, which is beneficial. It reduces dementia. We have no drug that can do that. And so the National Institute of Aging discourages healthy drinking by seniors and attacks their personal agency. Those stories about George and Betty are about how people are fooling themselves by thinking that at an old age they can drink. I hate to tell a story out of school, but Will Godfrey published this, and I happen to know that his grandmother lived to be over 100, and she was cognitively intact, and she used to have a vodka drink at night once a night. So he was already, he wasn't,
He's had the lived experience.
Stunned by this information. So after all of this, to me, I'm just sitting here. We're overcome with anxiety about dementia. We're pushing drugs that the best minds are saying, this is an iffy proposition you're approving. And we know, let's just make the most conservative statement, that in certain socially secure situations, drinking per se, among those who drink versus those who don't drink, makes people less likely to have dementia. And we have the National Institute of Aging funding that research. And we have the Framingham and the Whitehall studies, which are the gold standards of that. Can't we tell people that? Don't we owe it to the people to say, here's some information, use it at your discretion. We don't think you're not an imbecile. So after all of that, one of the people, I've mentioned his name, Tim Stockwell, I've known for quite a long time. I sent it out, and I have a tendency to put things in a kind of a strong way. So I say, Jürgen Rehm, Robin Room, and Tim Stockwell, among others, in the World Health Organization, are censoring what we can hear about alcohol and putting out only negative information and not giving people the respect of letting them make their own situations. And I sent it to Tim, and he wrote, bah humbug, sort of friendly. Bah humbug, all those silly health benefits are due to bias and confounding. Now, one of the people that published that study was Jürgen Rehm himself, who's an anti-alcohol guy who did that survey of the 28 meta-studies. So is he saying he's an imbecile? Is he saying that the researchers at the University of Michigan understand what Tim Stockwell is saying? Well, the reason that people who drink are doing better is because they're better off. They are able to control for employment levels. That's why they call it they've been doing this for 50 years, since World War II. I got my PhD at Michigan. Is Tim Stockwell saying, oh, I'm happy that the NIH prevented Seltzer from publishing this. I'm happy that the National Institute of Aging funds this research and doesn't mention it, but only suggests that only old people who drink are idiots who are going to get in trouble. It's almost as though he's approving censorship and putting down his fellow researchers. So I doubt, I know that what I say isn't going to change anything. It'll maybe make a slight slurp in the water, but it's an answer to the question, there's something we're extremely concerned about. We have data that suggests there's something that can be beneficial, and our biases are such that we're willing to suppress, not even mentioning all that information. So that's my little diatribe for today.
Well, it's a great article. What's the name of the piece that you wrote?
The title was Will came up with it. Alcohol and dementia, why the evidence has been suppressed. But honestly, Will's from England. That grandmother lived and died in the UK. I don't think an American would have been able to publish what I wrote.
One thing I enjoyed about it is what you sort of said at closing there. People have this idea that, well, okay, so you're boosterish about drinking at a moderate level. Oh, so okay, that's your bias or something. But they have the idea that you don't understand that there could be confounding variables, or there could be a reverse correlation or something like that. And you're saying not only do you understand that, the researchers doing the studies that you're citing, of course, understand that.
Those guys at Michigan are imbeciles.
Right. It's not like they're not controlling for anything. And if they weren't, what the deeper the issue is that why can't these studies see the light of day in any sort of journal and any sort of reporting to the public, and let the public, be wise enough to do with that information what they will, and let science continue. So if people want to correct it, they can correct it or make, advances on it.
Especially since outcomes are so negative. It's not like, oh, we're doing so great, let's suppress all of this.
Right.
So I wanted to switch for the last part of this little talk to something a little bit more positive. Do you know about, what's the name of this website? Do you happen to know?
You're talking about Let Grow?
Yeah. Do you know anything about the website, what it's all about?
Yeah, letgrow.org. It's it's Lenore Skenazy's. Is that the one you mean? The one that Lenore Skenazy runs?
Lenore Skenazy's one. And they have Roman's cooking show. And I was just sitting there, and Lenore Skenazy's my hero, but I want to talk about my new hero is Roman's cooking show. His mother's named Ayla, Ayla, and she tells her origin story is she had a little cooking, what do you call that podcast? And her son, Roman's too. And while he's watching it, he starts mouthing all the stuff. Let's show them how to cook a cake, Mom, and she's going, So when he was 2, they made a video of him baking a cake. And it's a little messy. And I think he's at 4 now. They have him making brownies, sushi, and a fruit snack. And I'm watching this, sometimes it's almost like I'm stoned. So when he's making brownies, he takes the bowl and he puts it on his head because he's 4. And I'm going, how would I react to that? You probably say, oh, don't put your dirty head in the bowl. But his mother's doesn't say a word. His mother's off camera. And he says, let's have the bowl, Mom, please. He always says, please. And when she gives him the bowl, he always says, thanks. And then he puts it on his head. And you're thinking, you can't eat a brownie cooked in a thing that he's put on his head. And then while he's making it, he sort of licks the utensils and all. And I'm thinking, wow. But, they are going to bake it at 350 degrees for 10 minutes. So I think we're good.
We're sanitary. Yeah.
I think we're going to make it all right. So he makes brownies, and then he makes sushi. And then he makes a fruit thing. So he's going to use a food, and he's pretty slow. First, like I say, he'll lick the utensils, and then he's going to miss putting all the fruit into the food processor. But he's like conscious of that. He goes, oops, and he tries to pick it up. And his mother claims that he always cleans up afterwards. And then he makes sushi. And, I don't know how much you know about making sushi. I have a rough idea. So you put it on a mat, you roll it up, and then you have to cut it with a giant knife. And even I'm going, oh my God, what's she going to do? And his mother periodically, she's giving him the bowls and all. And his mother's like, you think, who is this woman? She sort of has some tattoos, and she has a sort of spiky hairdo. I mean, she's not from the Upper East Side of New York. And she's a little nervous giving him a big knife that you need to cut the roll. And he doesn't want her to guide him. And then she does this thing where next shot is, if you see a comic routine, somebody will have 4 arms because somebody's sticking their arms through. She gets behind him to cut with the knife, and that makes him laugh. So we're good. And then he makes a fruit thing with little slices of fruit. He puts in the food processor. And I disbelieve in my eyes, I think she lets him use a little paring knife on his own. And, so some of the comments, everybody goes, wow. And the typical comment people write is, I don't know how she does it. I don't know how she's so patient. And so, I don't know, she's my hero for the year. I mean, he hasn't cut off any fingers or arms. He hasn't got his hand stuck in the food processor. He helps clean up. It's a big mess. So obviously, he's 2 and 4. There are going to be germ specialists who say you can't let him lick the utensils.
Right.
Although everything gets baked. So, nobody's died.
And I've got to tell you, there are other horrible things that 2-year-olds do that are less sanitary in everyday life. Just him being there probably is not sanitary. So we're good on that front.
And of course, you're sitting there thinking, I'm thinking, how is she able to do that? The kid's having a great time. And you're thinking, well, this kid's going to know how to cook. And he's going to know how to do a lot of stuff. And he's not going to be sitting there being anxious if he tries something new. So, whether it's, let kids grow.
I looked it up. It is from letgrow.org, Roman's cooking channel.
And, it almost makes me cry, and I want to, end, this year on a positive note and just say, you can look on television. She's like a regular, Isla, I think it's his mother's name. She's like she's obviously smart. Like when she speaks, she's not part of the cultural elite. She's I don't know where they're cooking from. Indiana, I don't know, Pennsylvania. And it's an example of how in just an everyday situation, a human being can go against some of the things that you're anxious about, the germ thing, the knife thing. Your kid can grow up whole, and you can be encouraging and strengthening a human being. I just have a good outlook for where he's going to end up. And so she's my nominee for Parent and Person of the Year.
It's the essence of mindfulness, isn't it? Ellen Langer had a story about somebody. She was at some convention one time, and a guy said, "Will you watch my horse for a minute? I'm going to go get him a hot dog." And she said, I'm Harvard, Yale all the way. I thought horses don't eat hot dogs. And then he came back and the horse was chomping on it. And then she thought, well, wait a minute, what does it mean horses don't eat hot dogs? Of course they can, and it depends on how hungry they are or, how they've been raised. That's what this reminds me of. You could say 2-year-olds don't cook, and you could certainly say 2-year-olds can't cook sushi. 2-year-olds can't have knives. 2-year-olds can't, they can't lick the spoon. But of course, a 2-year-old can. And so, what's the benefit of letting go of your preconceived notions versus being hyper focused on the safety aspect or the way that the thing turns out? It's really the most mindful thing I could think of.
And I'll just throw one more I can't resist example in there. I'm reading Anne Pichette's, since I wrote a memoir, My Quest to Change How We See Addiction, A Scientific Life on the Edge. Anne Pichette's memoir is called These Precious Days. She got married very late. She married a doctor. She was older. They dated, I think, for 14 years. She didn't have a conventional, she's divorced once when she was younger, but she appreciates her husband, who's Carl, seems like a very kind man. They went on a trip and they met a woman, seemed to be a little bit alone. They took her out to dinner. He just seems to be a good person. And one chapter about her husband, she said, well, his first solo flight when he was 8 years old. And he went out to the plane and he started it and he took up around the field and landed it. And she's sort of thinking, that's impossible. You could never let anybody do that. But he did it. Maybe let me backtrack. Maybe he was 12 years old when he did that. I'm sorry. He did something with he took his daughter to the Himalayas when she was 5. But he was maybe 12 when he flew the plane solo. And, he's a doctor, very kind. He comes across as a little bit unconscious. It's like he sort of doesn't know you're not allowed to do those things. They didn't
Yeah.
together. Anne Pichette, so she didn't have to deal with those anxieties on her own. She knows her stepdaughter, and she said, would you take your 5-year-old to the Himalayas? and the daughter sort of laughs and says, no, but, so, I don't blame me. Read Anne Pichette's These Precious Days about Carl, her husband's experiences, and just loosen up your expectations as you were describing of what a child can do,
Excellent. That's a good message to bring in the new year with.
Happy New Year to you and yours, Zach.
To you too, Stanton.